Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special Prog Report interview. We're pleased to welcome back once again to the podcast the great Stephen Wilson. How you doing, sir?
Well, that's very nice of you to introduce me as the great Stephen Wilson, unless you're spelling that Grate. No, I'm very busy. I'm a bit tired. I've just got back from, so we've been doing this. Sorry, I'm already going off on one,
No, go
aren't I?
ahead.
We've been doing
Go
these
ahead.
screenings of screening playback sessions of the new record, which for various reasons kind of made sense because there wasn't going to be any singles, etc. So I just got back from Rome, Berlin, and Paris. One a day, 3 days. I am shattered. Yeah.
Well,
But
thank you for squeezing in and
Yeah.
a little bit of time here. Also joining is Prog Nick, who the two of us had the
Hi,
pleasure of
everyone.
talking to you a few years ago for the Top Audiophiles podcast. Which, if anybody hasn't seen it, it's really a great discussion, and lots of people have seemed to view that one. So that's fun. You can always go back and check that out. We have a bunch of questions here that we're looking at, but my mind is already going off the board, which tends to happen. Um, w- you know, I think what's fascinating, the fact that you haven't released singles, but yet I think it still works because you built this whole concept around the entire album, right? It's the music has a concept, and then the visual, and then the way you're doing the movie, and you build like a whole thing around it. Do you think that nowadays releasing an album, maybe that's what you kind of have to do to sort of cut through, other than releasing just an album of 10 random songs, that it makes it a little bit harder to cut through all the noise?
Well, I certainly think in this age, I heard a statistic the other day, which I will repeat for your listeners, stroke viewers, which is that in the year of 1989, all of the music released between the 1st of January and December 31st, 1989, the equivalent is now released every single day onto the internet. So we're
That's
talking
insane.
about insane. We're talking about 365 times more amount. You refer to it as noise. Uh, con- some people would say content, which is an equally horrible word. Um, 365 times more music for people to negotiate their way through to find the music that they might potentially like. And of course, the reality is that a lot of that music is quite generic and not particularly interesting. So it's even harder to find your way through to the stuff that you like. So to answer your question, I think one of the things that you can do to make your music stand out is make willfully uncommercial gestures. Um, and this is a willfully uncommercial gesture, even for me, who's kind of embraced by the community that tends to like, more conceptual album work. I still got a lot of fans that came to me from other directions, and this will be a challenge for them. But I think that bold gestures these days are kind of what people are looking for because otherwise they don't know what to look for. There's just too much all the time. They're being bombarded all the time with new music. So it's kind of a willfully uncommercial gesture, which, as you say, has made it, I suppose, stand out a little bit more. Not in the progressive rock community where albums with two 20-minute long tracks are 10 a penny,
That's
but
right.
certainly, in terms of my more mainstream profile, this has been perceived as something quite bold and willfully uncommercial to do. And bring it on, bring it on.
Yeah, no. Well, we certainly love it.
Absolutely.
I think that's where we'll start actually with the questions about the record. You talked about how you have fans from more mainstream and other directions, and certainly the last maybe three albums, I suppose, where we're sort of steering away from the grand concept prog stuff a little bit. Future Bites probably more so, but now with this one, you even sort of have said it. It's going back a little bit to the progressive style. Um, Looking back on it now and presenting the album, are you seeing that again? That it's you going back into the prog world, or it's just an extension of everything else?
Well, this is a tricky one because it's kind of both in a way. I mean, I'm very wary to use the P word anyway, because I think everyone has their own agenda about what that means. And so it's a very difficult thing to say something you've done is prog or progressive, because to some people that will mean it sounds like it was recorded in 1972. And clearly this is a long way from that. It's an album that I could only have made, or anyone could only have made now. And in a sense, it's a continuation of my the musical vocabulary that I've established over my career. So you'll hear pop, you'll hear post-punk, you'll hear ambient, you'll hear electronica, you'll hear metal riffs, you'll hear jazz. But yes, you'll also hear a lot of what people would associate with progressive music. I think the main thing that takes this back perhaps to something that people from the more progressive community will recognize and kind of be in sympathy with is it's got more of a conceptual flow to it. So these are two very long pieces which unfold in fairly unpredictable ways, which have nothing to do with the conventional pop song form, which of course is one of the hallmarks of quote unquote progressive rock. So it's a return to that sensibility. But I think people will also hear it very much as being a continuation of a lot of the sounds and a lot of the sounds and approaches that I took on Harmony Codex in that respect. So it feels to me like the next logical step, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had this debate in our chat groups with with some of us on
Sure.
here, and it's been a lot of fun to discuss. The thing that sounds familiar to me in some of the earlier records, sorry, that you've made on this one is a lot of the sounds that you use here. You have a sort of specific kind of keyboard sounds and guitar tones, and the way you do your vocal harmonies and things like that that at times seem recognizable. Are there certain things you go to? For instance, on the overview track, the part with the vocals and stuff, there's like this slide guitar that comes in that just takes me back to like Light Bulb Sun immediately. You know what I mean? Are there certain things that you go to, or it's just naturally the way you work, if that makes sense?
The question makes perfect sense. I think it is the latter. I'm not. I mean, like like any musician, I'm limited. I have a very limited kind of range of things that I do. I'd like to think that my range is perhaps a little bit broader than some,
Oh,
but
for
still.
sure. Yeah.
But
Okay,
still,
little.
I have my own comfort zone and I have my own cliches, and sometimes I can't get away from them, even though I would like to. And of course, I think part of what you have to do is kind of embrace that as saying, well, that's what gives me my sound, instantly recognizable sound. So yes, there's certain things I do which just work for me. And not only do they work for me, they work for me over and over and over. Um, the big slide thing, yeah, it's a musical gag I've been using for many years, just like the megaphone voice, the telephone voice I've been using my whole career, and things like that. They're kind of, I suppose they're part of my paint box, and I still like to use those colors in my music. And much as I would like to think that every album is a radical reinvention, probably the reality is that to the more kind of objective listener, they'll hear a lot of commonality between all of the records, and I feel like I should probably embrace that as a good thing rather than a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great thing. We're all used to it. Just going back to what you were saying about standing out, Stephen, I was reading an article by Jean-Michel Jarre, who was writing for the IFPI, and he said something about if you don't do something stylistically different, you're just screaming in space these days, which I thought was a nice phrase. But speaking of space, look, it's not obviously not just Brian May who has an interest in stars and the cosmos. This has a link to an obvious interest in that. Can you tell us more about that and the concept behind how this concept came about and how you translated that into an album and then ultimately a film?
For sure. Yeah. So the overview was something I had not heard of, but just to rewind slightly, about a year ago, I had a few I didn't know what I wanted to do next musically. So I thought maybe I'll do some collaboration of some kind with somebody. And one of the meetings I had was with a very good friend of mine, Alex Milas, who runs an organization called Space Rocks. And Space Rocks is an organization dedicated to bringing together the worlds of science and astronomy with music, which in some ways feels like strange bedfellows, but actually it makes a lot of sense because I think one thing that creative people and astronomers have in common is they're both interested in what's beyond. What else is out there? What is beyond our understanding? It's that kind of curiosity that drives you forward. So he's been running this organization very successfully, creating events for whole families where they have astronomers talking and musicians playing. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do something perhaps in collaboration with Space Rocks, perhaps creating a bespoke piece of music for an event? Anyway, to cut a long story short, during the conversation, he said to me, "Have you heard about this thing called the overview effect?" And I hadn't. And he told me what it was. It's a recognized phenomenon when astronauts for the very first time go into space and they look back at the Earth from space, they have this very kind of profound moment, a cognitive shift, if you will, where they understand just how insignificant but beautiful the Earth is in relation to the universe, and by extension, just how insignificant, therefore, the human species is. And what was fascinating to me, and one thing he explained to me very early on, is that people have an incredible range of reactions to this. Some people have a feeling of elation, and other people have a feeling of depression. And they see it as a very kind of negative experience. William Shatner, famously, Captain Kirk himself, said that when
Wow.
he saw the Earth from space, all he saw was death and nothingness, which is extraordinary from a bloke that's boldly explored, et cetera, et cetera. So that idea immediately fascinated me, and it was almost like the whole album came to me in my head in a few moments. I just saw it all laid out, and I knew that it had to be in the long form. It wouldn't make sense to write 10 individual songs. This had to be a movie for the ears, essentially. And I wish it was always that straightforward. I don't always have such a strong direction from the very moment I start a project, but on this occasion, it was all clear to me in my head right from that moment.
Hmm.
Okay. So then the concept and the structure of having two long songs, one of 23 minutes and one of 18 minutes, that was intentional and constructed all the way along.
Like I said, I think I knew that I wanted to do it in the long form. I didn't see that it would work to write individual songs. Um, and the reason there are two pieces is because I'm old and I still think in terms of vinyl. And I just
Right.
thought there's going to be side one and there's going to be side two. But
Yeah.
also, I grew up. I love those old out, things like Tubular Bells and In a Silent Way and Tangerine Dream's Rubicon. Albums where you basically just got one track per side. I love records like that. So this was an opportunity to do that. But actually, there is more to it than that because one side is more about humanity and the second side is more about the science. Not exclusively, but that's certainly the way I look
Hmm.
at it.
Yeah. And as you were producing and composing in the studio, were you ever tempted at any time to go out of that structure and maybe add a couple more, I don't know, a couple of hidden tracks or an additional piece of material here or there, or did you rigidly stick to that structure?
No, I wanted it to be two pieces. I wanted it to be a 40-minute, two-track album. I was very set on that. And when I get set on a concept, it's very hard to break me out of that particular mindset. Yeah.
When the CD first came out, and then maybe 10 or 15 years into it, everybody started to take advantage of let me put on as much on there as I can to the detriment of many albums, right? Like they all have filler, as you've done on your Album Years podcast, I'm sure, talked about. Um, I'm seeing a lot more records, maybe not as many as we think, but there's been a lot more records that are shorter and trying to fit towards that one vinyl to side A, side B. Do you think that's a newer trend now that maybe will be coming back more?
I do. I think a lot of people are beginning to understand that most of the classic albums are from the era of vinyl, and that there seems to be something about the 40-minute time span that is the optimum for people to engage with a
Mm.
single piece of music. I mean, it still has to be an interesting, good piece of music, of course, but I think there's something about going beyond 40 or 45 minutes that doesn't matter how good the music is, doesn't matter how good it is, your brain starts to switch off. For the same reason that 90 minutes seems to be the optimum length for a movie, a piece of cinema, it just where we seem to have arrived. There's a kind of implicit understanding that 40 minutes is the kind of the golden number,
Yeah,
for an album. And I think you're right. There seems to be a swing back of the pendulum in that direction that people are understanding this. Even shorter. Maybe it's also a response to the fact that now TikTok reduces music to 15 seconds
right.
time. So generally people are having a lot less time to engage with a piece of music. I mean, hopefully we can think in terms of something beyond 15 seconds, but no, I was very set on it being the
Yeah.
classic album. And I'm always in the back of my mind aware that there are some people always out there that will always view purchasing a record as, you know, never mind how much in the quality, I want as much as I can get, you know.
Mm.
But hopefully most people are being disabused of that notion these days, that quality, something you want to go back to time and time again, is much more precious than just pure quantity.
Well, you know what I was listening to yesterday, just coincidentally, I had this urge to just put on Rubber Soul from the Beatles on
Mm.
vinyl, and it's like 30 minutes long, and you know what I
Mm.
mean? It's very short, but it's like amazing, and it was brilliant to listen to, and you're not like, man, this was too short, it should have been longer, or there's no feeling of that when you listen to something like that.
I can't remember the last time I put on an album and got to the end of it and thought, man, that was too short. Usually it's the opposite. You know what I mean? It's like, God, that was an endurance test. No matter how much I might have liked it, there's always a sense that it's not something I want to go back to straight away. For
Yeah.
me, the beautiful thing is when you listen to a record and you get to the end of it and you want to put it on again straight away, because you want more of it. You're not exhausted by the experience of listening to it. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute the overview will be that, but that's kind of what I would hope anyway, at least with some
Well,
of this.
it's been like that for me from, and listening to it from the beginning. One of the things, I think we touched on it earlier, but I'm curious how much pressure there might have been to put out a single or pick out a part from it. And I imagine, knowing how you've talked about it, that would be impossible by your estimation, and you didn't put out any singles. But how much of that was a sort of a challenge in marketing the album?
So of course it came up. It came up with the record company early on. What are we going to do? How are we going to promote the record? And I was pretty adamant from the beginning that I didn't want any piece of the jigsaw puzzle taken out of context, or choose your own metaphor. I didn't want a scene taken out of the middle of the movie and presented in
Right.
isolation. To be honest, I've always had that issue, even with the Harmony Codex. Like the first single we released from that album was Economies of Scale. And I knew that a lot of fans were going to listen to that and say, oh, that's what the album's like. And of course, it was just one track among 11, and they were all completely different. So there's always that problem of what's representative of an album. And in my case, it's very difficult because I do kind of I kind of try to knit together all these different approaches. In this case, the record company, I have to say, were completely behind me in that. They, I think for the reason you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, anything that makes you stand out from the crowd. I
Yeah.
think record companies are also looking for that now because they're struggling to get heard through the mass of music released every day. So the record company, bless them, Jim and Michael at the record company, they're real music fans. They understand me. They understand my fans and what my fans like. They were completely behind it from the beginning. But then, as you say, the problem comes, well, how do we market this? And one of the ways we've chosen to do that is with these playback events,
Right.
of which there's many more to come.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, Stephen, let's talk a little bit about the other contributors to the album. Interestingly, you've got Andy Partridge from XTC who contributed some lyrics. Can you tell us what it was like working with him? Of course, Randy McStein, the ubiquitous Randy McStein, is featured on the album. Your wife, Rotem, appears on the album. You want to tell us a little bit more about those collaborations?
So Andy, I mean, I've worked with Andy before. He wrote the title track to the Bone. He wrote the lyrics for that many years ago. And the reason I went to Andy this time is because I think well, I know that there was one scene. I think of the tracks as having scenes to continue the cinematic analogy. Very pretentious,
Hmm.
I know, but that's the way it's written. There was one scene I wanted on the first side, which would be kind of observational stuff, observational stuff, everyday lives of ordinary people, quote unquote, living in ordinary towns, quote unquote. And there's little kind of soap operas, little dramas that kind of are part of our everyday lives, the kind of minutiae, if you like, of everyday life. But I wanted to contrast that with the most massive cosmic phenomena happening in the universe, like stars dying, nebula, diving, black holes imploding. Again, to create that idea of cosmic perspective or cosmic
Hmm.
vertigo. And for me, there are two people in the history of pop music, certainly in the English language anyway, Ray Davies of the Kinks and Andy Partridge, that have written better than anyone else about everyday, ordinary lives. That kind of observational songwriting. I think Andy is the king of that, along with Ray Davies. So I called up Andy and I said, Andy, I've got a challenge for you. And I told him what I wanted. And of course, he rose to the challenge and did a brilliant job. So that's the Andy story. Randy, of course, I knew from having toured with him as part of the Porcupine Tree Band.
Yeah.
And what I love about Randy is, he's young compared to me. He's this young kid, in my view, anyway. He's in his 30s. Just shows you how old I am. Um, what I love about Randy is he's very au fait with the tradition of classic rock, but he's also very excited about the possibilities of modern technology and new music as well, as am I. So, for example, Randy is a guitar player that can play in the style of a classic rock player, but he's also very into the sound design. And sometimes I get a little bit disappointed when I work with great guitar players that they're not more curious about messing about with the sound of the guitar. They stick to the very traditional
Yeah.
tones. And Randy is very excited about all the new technology available to us that can mutate, twist guitar sounds. So, and of course, it goes without saying that sometimes the sound, if you get the sound, it makes you play differently. And Randy completely gets that. So we work very hard on kind of redefining the notion of the classic rock guitar. I mean, there's a very long guitar solo at the end of side one here. And for me, it was like, it was my instruction to Randy was, right, we're going to do the not comfortably numb.
Right.
Not there's anything wrong with Comfortably Numb. It is the greatest guitar solo of all time, in my opinion. But it's been done. It's been done, and it's been imitated badly too many times, mostly by me, it has to be said. So, one thing I said to Randy was, we're going to redefine the notion of that kind of epic, dramatic, momentous, extended guitar solo in the context of a conceptual rock piece. So a lot of it was about searching for a sound, a more interesting sound. And then that kind of informed the way he played, the kind of the notes he chose. And Randy, to answer your question, Randy is completely up for that kind of idea of exploring those possibilities. And then my wife wrote him, well, she's made a cameo on the last three albums now.
Yeah.
What can I say? I love her voice. I love her. And she's available. She's just in the next room when I need someone. So
There you go.
it's kind of convenient too.
Yeah,
That
that's
works.
awesome. I want to jump into the tour. I know we got a few more minutes with you if we can. You haven't had a chance to tour for a while. In the last two records, you didn't get to tour, so we're expecting that there's going to be a lot of that on this one. But now you also have 40 minutes of this new record, which you said you want to play. So how on earth are you managing figuring this out? What you're going to play?
So the simple answer to that question is I'm trying to take the overview as a starting point for thinking about what other pieces I might play. So without giving too many spoilers away, I'm kind of going back into my catalog and finding other pieces I think which kind of fit. And it could be something in the lyrics conceptually. It could be something musically that feels to me like it will cohere with the overview. I mean, it's going to be quite a long show. It's a 2.5 hour show with an interval. The second half is a performance of the overview, and the first half will be a voyage through my back catalogue. But as I say, kind of trying to find pieces of music which feel like they might fit well into a show based around the overview. And more than that, I don't really want to say at the moment.
Yeah, I saw this documentary of Bruce Springsteen on his last tour. I don't know if you've seen that, but he talked about how, and I didn't pay attention because I saw the tour, but he talked about how he planned it was a theme around his songs, and you wouldn't really think about it like that, but there was like this underlying theme of like getting older and mortality and all that kind of stuff, and throughout there were points of songs that all sort of tied together, if in the way the songs that open the show and close the show. So I guess that's the same sort of idea you might be talking about.
Maybe so, yeah. Thankfully, not quite yet about mortality. No,
Right, right, right.
but that I'm sure that will come. But no, so definitely that seems to be a similar principle to try and find songs which, share something in their DNA. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope to be at one of the London shows. So
Oh wow,
yeah,
amazing.
looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I might just fly in to meet you there. I might just.
Let's do
Do
it.
it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
Stephen, forgive me for asking this question, but I don't want to be assassinated, which I will be if I don't take the opportunity to ask this question. And don't feel obligated to answer it in any way. But the rumor mill is absolutely rife with talk about another Porcupine Tree album. All the buzz is about the overview right now, and the focus should be on the overview. But is this something you're ready to talk about yet? Another Porcupine Tree album?
Well, there's nothing really to say. I mean, people ask me the question, are Porcupine Tree going to do anything more? And I say, and I've been quite honest, I've said, I'm sure we will. I think we had a great time making the last record. We had a lovely time touring it as well, the best touring experience we've ever had together, really. Um, and I think the answer to the question is really if we felt we had something new to say, as you know from talking to me, the one thing I kind of avoid is that idea of just repeating some more of the same doesn't interest me. And I know that's true for Gavin and Richard too. So if we could find something new that we wanted to say within the context of the band, I think I'm sure we would record again. Whether we'll tour again, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll record again. But honestly, there's no plans. It's just a kind of an idea at the moment. But as you say, right now I'm very much focused on the overview. So more than that, I can't really say.
What are your thoughts on like AI and how it's
Oh, well,
getting into music and everything? I'm just curious what if it's something that you think could be a positive or just the worst thing ever.
it's a big subject. It's a big subject. It's arguably the biggest subject, isn't it? The almost existential crisis of creativity versus AI. Um, You know what? I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I didn't use any AI on the overview at all. I did use AI on a sort of Christmas single I did a couple of years ago, which was kind of
Yeah.
a novel song anyway. So I thought
Hmm.
this could be a good chance to explore what it could do. And I used ChatGPT to generate Christmas lyrics in the style of Stephen Wilson. And honestly, it produced a lot, 99% of which was pretty awful. Very generic, very cliched, very banal, but it generate about 1% it generated I could use. So it was really a question of me going through and picking, oh, that's a good line. That shit, that shit, that shit, that shit, that shit. Oh, that's a good line. And
Right.
ending up with something that I thought was usable. So to me, if you want something very generic, AI is probably going to be a very useful tool for you. When I create stuff, I'm kind of looking for things that are surprising, that aren't predictable. So AI is of very little use to me now at the moment. But obviously, with the caveat that we're still in the very early days of AI, it's only going to
Yeah.
get better. And maybe in 5 years, you'll be able to press a button and an album like The Overview will pop out of an AI engine. Who knows? I mean, I hope not. I really hope not, obviously, because I also believe that what's special about music or any creativity is that thing soul. Um, it's the kind of reflection of a human being to lots of other human beings, and seeing if those other human beings recognize themselves in that mirror. And if AI is able to fake that, I don't think so. I think that's it. I think it does a job of faking it, but it's not the real thing. Um, Having said that, there will be a place for AI in the same way that I mean, the other way I look at it is that we've kind of had AI in the music industry for years. We've had, for the last 25 years, we've had software that can tune a singer that can't sing in tune,
Right.
like me,
Sure.
for example. We've had software that can make a drummer that can't play very well in time, make them sound in time. We've had software that can emulate orchestras, going back to the mellotron. Since the beginning of electricity, musicians have had tools which have helped them to make their music sound more polished and more impressive. So in that sense, AI is really just the next step, I think.
Right.
The more insidious side of it is, of course, is there's the potential for it to completely remove human beings from the process, which none of those other things were quite on that level. But I think if you disregard that side of things and you say, well, music still needs to have soul, creativity still needs to have that human element, then it just becomes just another tool to add to our auto-tune software and our beat detective software and our samplers and all the other things that we have and have been using to make our music sound more polished and professional over the years.
Yeah.
So I think the simple answer to your question is I'm somewhere between. I think it will be incorporated. I probably will end up using it, even if it's just if I get writer's block with lyrics. I might, the same way I would go to a thesaurus or a dictionary,
Well, that's the thing. I like to use it for, I write a sentence in a review or something like that, and I need another word here, and then it's great. That kind of thing is fantastic.
That's where I see it ultimately fitting in. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's have you already started planning what's next? Do you see 10 years down the line other collaborations you want to do? Or you're strictly like right here in the overview world and that's for now?
So I am very focused on the overview because of the tour. So, the last couple of records, as you say, I didn't tour, so I was already thinking about the next thing. Here, I can only think about the long year of touring I've got, which I'm really looking forward to. But there's a lot of work to do in preparation and rehearsal for that. So I don't know is the answer. I mean, the list of things I would like to do, of course, is endless. There are so many things to do that I could do, so many people I could work with. Unfortunately, life is too short to squeeze them all in. So the simple answer is I don't know yet, but hopefully something again different, something completely different
Yeah,
again.
I'm sure you'll surprise us again. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. A pleasure as always to talk to you. It's always fascinating and interesting, and just love the new record and everything you do is always exciting. So, thanks for giving us some more time.
Likewise.
Thank you,
Thanks very
Stephen, and
much.
congratulations on the record. It's great.
Thank you very much,
Yep.
Nick.
Everybody,
We'll see you in London.
Absolutely. Both
All
of you,
right.
I hope.
All
hope
right.
so.
Bye.
Hope so.
Hey, thanks for checking out the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all our socials and progreport.com. And we'll see you all again real soon. Thanks.